I'm sure your methods were adequate, wise Agarum, but I have not traveled here all the way from Zrak for boasting, but for results. It is our duty to save those tainted by darkness, after all, so instead of bragging, simply show me you managed to purify a single Aramathi soul. As you wish, Chief Presenter. Bring in the shadow. As you can see, O Radiant One, conversion techniques used by me and my garden have completely removed the violence and resistance to everlasting light from this shadow. With just a few carefully crafted chants, my retinue of voiced ones were able to remove the influence of eternal darkness at the very core. So you say, wise Agarum, and yet I see you have not removed the shackles from this shadow, as if you are unsure of your own wards. If it is truly freed, then it should stand proud and tall, like all those blessed by the light. Remove its shackles, wise one, and let its actions speak for themselves. Radiant One, this being is not worthy of standing straight in your presence. I can assure you that, wise Agarum, are you suggesting that those blessed by the light are not equal in our eyes? Are you claiming to have an insight into souls of these shadows, insight that even I, chosen of the light, do not possess? Of course not, Radiant One, I merely... Then do as I command, wise one. Unshackle it. Good. Can you hear me, Shadow? Can you tell me whom do you serve? I serve the light that will shine brightly once we burn you and your entire pathetic race to the ground plant. Now die! I thank you for your assistance, Enlighteners. Such a shame. This poor creature had a chance to join the Radiance, but its soul was still tainted. Take its shell away with the rest. Now, wise Agarum, Radiant One, I had no idea this would happen. It seemed pacified at the temple. You have tried your best, wise Agarum. I'm sure you have. And I know that this is nothing but a temporary setback, something that must have happened in order for the other conversions to succeed. I rest assured, knowing that once the voiced ones will chant the canticle of truth with you, it will all turn out to be a simple, misguided mistake. The canticle. Radiant One, there is no need for this. I will donate all my wisdom to the light. I will swear the vow of asceticism, but I beg you, take it away, enlighten us. I fear spending so much time with these shadows might have polluted wise Agarum's soul. And find out how this Aramathi managed to bring inside an incendiary grenade. Now, who is next? That would be me, Chief Presenter, wise Lumgar at Light Service. As wise Agarum, I managed to convert one of the shadows to the light. Used a different method, but it would be better if I just showed you. Come in, Marnath. There it is. As you can see, Chief Presenter, Marnath walks on its own, with no shackles or binds in its body nor its soul. So I see. Impressive, wise Lumgar. Approach, Marnath. Let me take a look at you. Yes, I see it in its eyes, my dear Garden. I never thought it to be possible, but tell me, Marnath, who do you serve? I, Marnath, serve the everlasting light, the radiance that brings life and enlightens darkness. I serve as its eyes and arms and voice. I will not rest until the world is free from darkness. I am Zrakan. Yes, Marnath, you are Zrakan, an enlightened, radiant, glowing Zrakan. Welcome, child, among those who witnessed the light. I must say, I am impressed, wise Lumgar. So many cycles of failed conversions, and yet you succeed. Now, yes, what is it, Enlightener? A message from the Far Ones. Let's see. So it is as I feared. The darkness must have felt our success here today, and decided to push back. Wise Lumgar, how many of those Aramathi you can convert daily? About a dozen if I'm acting on my own, Chief Presenter. Could do much more with more petals. You will receive as much help as you request, wise one. The human shadows are pushing back, trying to destroy what our first crusade built. We must all prepare. We must ensure that Aramathi will become Zrakan, and the light will not fade, no matter what it takes. Live long and prosper, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Second Chance. Just a few days have passed since our declaration of war has been broadcasted to our entire population, but the shock of it still hasn't worn off. Our people expected it, sure, everyone expected it, but now that war is actually upon us, and we were the ones who initiated it no less, most of OCN citizens realized that, well, they simply had no idea what could happen. Humanity haven't seen any major conflict since the Exodus War back on Earth, which was over 2 centuries ago. So, while many of our citizens have agitated for this conflict, they now begin to realize the sheer scope of what awaits us. An interstellar war fought on every level of society, in which a single delver deep in the mines will be just as important as an admiral of a mighty warship. A war that, if we lose it, may very well mean the end of our entire civilization. The Zrakan probably won't exterminate us, but if we'll become planet-bound slaves like the Aramathi, it's doubtful that we'll ever gain enough power to fight back. So, we have to ensure we will be victorious in this war, and our government already had some ideas. When the Innovation Party came into power, they introduced a policy they called academic privilege. Basically, it's a sort of a sponsorship program that ensures that brightest minds of our society don't have to constantly worry about next salary and next meal. Instead, the program makes sure that if a citizen is a verified academic, with enough contributions to our national research, then the state will cover all their needs and ensure that they can live in best available conditions. The idea is, of course, to promote education among our citizens. If you can become a professor, you'll live like a king. But now, with the war on our heads, OCN leadership realized that maintaining this policy is a considerable drain on our resources that may otherwise be used for other military-minded projects. And so, in a series of emergency meetings, government of OCN decided to suspend the academic privilege until the war is over. Many citizens were angry about it, but the truth is unforgiving. Yes, our scientists were the ones who took us to space, and our engineers were the ones who developed weapons we'll now use against our foes, but all those ideas will mean nothing if we won't be able to build them. So for now at least, our best and brightest will have to take up some secondary jobs, which government will conveniently provide. We can only hope that it will convince them to work harder to make sure we win this war as soon as possible. And speaking of war, our fleet is slowly becoming a truly intimidating sight. A considerable amount of materials we earned from selling our technology has been put to building up our navy, and now Task Force Manticore is an impressive collection of 23 ships, 17 corvettes, 1 frigate, 1 cruiser, and freshly built quartet of destroyers, Ruby, Wise, Blake and Young. And though our navy still is rather pathetic when compared to Merit Citadel, it at the very least makes for a very impressive looking symbol, and statement of our technological advances. Just a couple years ago, we believed our 80-meter corvettes were a pinnacle of military engineering, but now with 500-meter Thor as our flagship, we know that we can do so much more. And in fact, we could do more at this very moment. Just a few weeks before the war was declared, our Department of Naval Engineering developed some plans that could, potentially, allow us to build new corvette models, heavier and more powerful ones. As of now, we use 2 regular models, Akula, which is our interceptor, and Akula T, which is our torpedo boat. But with those new designs, we could build heavy variants of these vessels, as well as other, more support-oriented ones. But while support corvettes are all fine and well, our military industrialists obviously focused on heavy types. For example, a heavy torpedo boat could be outfitted with a second launcher, which, as we have learned some time ago, is an extremely powerful weapon that could greatly increase our firepower against slow or immobile targets. And a heavy interceptor could be armed with 2 weapon turrets that would be similar in caliber to the guns we use on our destroyers, not to mention that we could install more advanced defensive systems. That would give our corvettes firepower similar to our destroyer, but with speed and maneuverability of a corvette. But, as with everything, there would be downsides. First one would be accuracy. As we know, larger guns are harder to aim, so these heavy corvettes wouldn't be as effective against fast-moving ships. And second, most important problem would be cost. Keeping our corvettes small and agile while adding more weapons and defenses would require use of far more expensive materials, and when our engineers presented their plans, it turned out that a fully operational heavy corvette or a torpedo boat would actually be almost as expensive as a destroyer. So, while there clearly is a ton of potential in these models, for now we're just going to stick to our regular ones. Quality is good, but for now quantity will have to do. But enough of planning and drawing boards.
It's time for our fleet to start acting and take the fight to the Zrakan Union. So, after a great parade around Merit Citadel, Task Force Manticore left Arvo system and moved to Nizhil, our heavily defended border that we will use as staging ground for our operations. And actually, Nizhil is becoming even more of a fortress. We already had a Berlin-class and Hanover-class defensive platforms there, but now our constructor ships are building in another one. This time it's a Königsberg-class platform, equipped with a shield dampener, a device that will severely reduce efficiency of enemy deflectors. The government clearly doesn't want to take any chances with Nizhil. 3 bases may seem extensive, but if we lose this system we cannot fight, so it's better to be safe than dead. But back to the fleet. We don't really know what awaits us in Aramus system, so in order to scout it out, Admiral Lin has decided to send one of her corvettes as forward observer to ensure we won't just fly right into a trap. Granted, it means that if there actually is a trap, then our scout ship will most probably be destroyed, but after a few hours of deliberation, the captain of CSV Vendetta decided he is up to the task, detach his ship from the fleet and open up a wormhole to Aramus. And as he was waiting for it to open, back on Ortus our government and our people were once more presented with a decision of creating yet another branch of the Interstellar Expanse project. This time though the discussion was tense. Some argued that with presence of such violent neighbors, we should focus our attention on projecting our supremacy. Other groups claimed that instead of that we should commit more funds to development of our diplomacy. After all, we can't stand against all dangers of the galaxy alone. Another group firmly stood by ideals of order, claiming that despite all the chaos among the stars, humanity should stay true to its course and present itself as an unmoving bastion of the galaxy. There was even a large civic movement that proposed a plan of expanding our efforts in the field of cybernetics, as such move could help us become more efficient in all our tasks. But in the end, it was an idea of our financial mogul, the man who introduced energy credits, Demetrius Sinon himself, that gathered most popular support. An idea that, at least according to Mr. Sinon, would help us both in peace and in war, and could ensure that humanity will thrive no matter how dangerous the situation will become. And so, after the votes were counted, the Council officially announced creation of Prosperity Branch. It was often said that a truly mature nation builds its way out of problems, and now, with more resources allocated to our economic efficiency, we will do exactly that. So, it seems that the motto adopted by the Innovation Party when they came into power has now been made official. May we all prosper among the stars. So, with our economy switching to wartime production, we can now focus on our frontline operations. And as you can see, CSV Vendetta has just reached the Aramus system and, thankfully, was not immediately attacked. The crew spent a few days scanning the system, and once they were sure that Zrakan fleet is not lurking somewhere, they sent all clear to Admiral Lin and the rest of the fleet. Still, the news weren't all good. That spaceport in New Sajha's orbit is still there, and it will certainly present a formidable obstacle. But until we destroy it, our troops won't be able to land on the planet and kick the occupants out, so we need to start thinking on how to deal with that problem. But just as we started hoping that the Zrakan may not be up for a fight, CSV Vendetta sent out yet another message. They have spotted enemy fleet, the so-called Radiant Host, and thanks to our long-range sensors, they were able to give us a rough estimate of its power. And unfortunately, it's not good for us. Turns out, Zrakan Armada massively outnumbers our own, counting 50 corvettes and 16 destroyers. No cruisers, which is a very good sight, but the hard truth is that we simply can't compete with their numbers for now, even though, at least according to estimates of Vendetta Chief Engineer, our ships are better than Zrakan ones when compared 1-to-1. So, if we had similar numbers, we could probably take them on, but until that happens, we're going to have to find some other way of hitting our enemies where it hurts. So, a bad start to this war. Combined with the firepower of their spaceport, Zrakan fleet immediately denied us access to our main objective. And as soon as Admiral Lin heard about it, she sent a priority message back home. We're going to need even more ships if we want to stand a chance in open confrontation. But despite those unpleasant news, we still gained some knowledge of our enemies. First, after analyzing data gathered from their fleet, we learned that Zrakan ships are using different kind of interstellar travel than we do, the so-called warp drive, that allows their ships to jump from system to system by basically creating some sort of time-space bubble around their ships, bending reality so that they can move extreme distances in relatively good time. The good news is that our method of transportation is faster and more direct. Once we open a wormhole, all, we can jump to any system in range in no time, bypassing all stars in our way. The downside, however, is that we are limited to the range of our generators, while the Zrakan are not. Given time, they can jump all across the galaxy, which means they can attack any one of our systems if they're willing to spend time traveling there. Or, in other words, they have reach, but we have flexibility. Up to us to figure out how to best use that combination. And soon Admiral Lin and her captains have developed a new strategy. To our surprise, the Radiant host stayed in orbit of New Sajha, instead of, as we expected, going for CSV Vendetta. So that lone corvette was ordered to remain on the fringes of the system and monitor Zrakan movement. That way we can always know what they're doing and hopefully exploit any opening. And in the meantime, the rest of Task Force Manticore can use our flexibility to start harassing Zrakan forces. And to do that, they have jumped to Fidulam system, and as soon as they arrived, an opportunity for our first strike presented itself, in form of Zrakan science ship. Technically, it is not part of their military, but if they are using their science vessels in the same way as we do, it is simply too important assets to be left in peace. And because of that, as soon as Manticore was in range, it fired every single gun into that Zrakan ship, blowing it to pieces in a matter of seconds. So, a first strike in this war goes to us, and enemy research efforts suffered as a result, but unfortunately it didn't go exactly as planned. See, Admiral Lin hoped that attacking Zrakan forces in different system would force their fleet to move, but instead they just stayed in orbit above New Sajha, unwilling to take the bait, which is of course the best thing they can do. After all, we have to take the fight to them, so they are content to just sit next to their fortifications and wait for our move. Back to the planning room then. Fortunately, we still have an ace up our sleeve, the Aramathi Resistance. Upon arriving into this system, Admiral Lin managed to establish contact with several rebel groups on the surface of Tintregal, the first and only world Aramathi managed to colonize before they were defeated. And though these rebels were far less numerous than the ones on New Sajha, they were nonetheless happy to offer help, in this case location of several key Zrakan military installations. So, with the help of these forward observers, Task Force Manticore parked above the planet and began our first orbital bombardment, and the results were both gruesome and spectacular, as our weapons, originally designed to fire over extremely long distances in space, turned out to be absolutely devastating against anything Zrakan ground forces could offer. And, most importantly, that barrage finally forced the Radiant host to move, and we soon received reports that it began moving away from New Sajha towards Fidulam system. Of course, that meant that Manticore had to get the hell out of here as fast as possible to avoid interception, but at the very least we now know that we can force the enemies to make a move, as they are clearly unhappy about us blowing up their planetary garrisons. But, as our fleet was retreating, our sensors picked up something interesting. Apparently there was a small group of 5 Zrakan ships already on their way to Fidulam, and Admiral Lin decided that, even if those turn out to be warships, we could probably manage to take down such a small number of them. There was of course risk of Radiant host catching up, but the decision was made and we turned off our wormhole modulators and powered up weapon systems. And, few days later, that decision was rewarded, because as soon as Zrakan ships entered the system, our fleet's sensors immediately categorized them not as warships, but as military transports. In a stroke of blind luck, we managed to intercept 5 Zrakan armies in transit, and now, given their absolute lack of escort and firepower, Manticore could just destroy these ships without trouble, and that was the first time we have witnessed the extent of Zrakan fanaticism. Upon realizing that we have complete advantage over our foes, Admiral Lin, true to her xenophilic ideals, tried to contact the crew of these transports and convince them to surrender, but they were not willing to listen, instead cutting off all communication attempts and performing more and more desperate evasive maneuvers. But unfortunately for them, their ships weren't too maneuverable, and after several minutes all that remained were 5 wreckages, drifting silently through space. Sadly though, we had no time to examine them, because main Zrakan fleet already arrived, but from bits of data we have gathered, we learned something very interesting. Turns out, Zrakan transported their armies in cryogenic hibernation, possibly in order to save space on their ships, as well as prevent morale loss due to very long travel times. So, even though our fleet destroyed just 5 large transport vessels, in truth they have eliminated 5 million of Zrakan soldiers, who weren't even aware what was happening due to their hibernation. That made everyone in our fleet realize the sheer scale of interstellar war. Back on Earth, losing 5 million troops was a disaster. Here, in space, it's a footnote, with barely any effect on overall conflict. All the more reason to fight harder, and ensure that our foes will never do the same to us.
Another day, another scientific breakthrough.
But we're not done with our lessons. Though our main fleet managed to safely evacuate back to Nigel, one of our ships, freshly built destroyer CSV Interceptor, was left behind, as it was trying to reach our fleet, and it only barely managed to avoid Zrakan battle group. Or in fact it didn't, because as it tried to flee, we realized that our vessels are slower than enemy counterparts. So, if anything, Interceptor was allowed to escape, which completely confused our officers. The Radiant host had this ship on a silver platter, but instead of exacting vengeance for destruction of their transport ships, they just resupplied on Tintragal and once more plotted course for Aramus. So, now we have two options. Either Zrakan Admiral is a complete fool and a coward, unwilling to commit to fighting, or they are a genius who realizes the importance of not leaving New Sajha without protection. For our own sake, it would be best to assume the second option, but at the very least now we know that we can bait Zrakan fleet. We just have to wait for a good moment to do so, although, as mentioned before, it would be best to force a decisive engagement as soon as possible, since our foes will, just like us, constantly reinforce their fleet. Suddenly, the idea of industrial warfare doesn't sound all that bad. So, after first few engagements, the war turned into a complete stalemate, and as you can see, it has now been almost 2 years since our incursion into Fidelum system. During that time, we kept playing cat and mouse with Zrakan fleet, baiting them to abandon New Sajha's orbit, but so far, our forces were unable to attack the starport there. They could do it, sure, but not one of our officers was convinced if our firepower was enough to destroy it fast enough, and the last thing we'd want during heated battle against enemy fortress would be arrival of Zrakan fleet. So the stalemate continues, and our shipyards keep churning out more and more ships, in hope to outproduce the Zrakan Union. But during that stalemate, we received an unexpected message from that empire located between us and isolationist Shizri, and that one was, well, to say surprising would be an understatement. First, this empire, the Zhir Compact, established contact with us already aware of our language, so we were able to immediately open up diplomatic channels. And that was where the greatest surprise happened. As our diplomats began discussing our cultures and ideals with these mantis-like aliens, they have learned that the Zhir are, well, surprisingly agreeable. Almost every time we presented an idea, their representatives have agreed with us, and the same thing happened other way around. Because, as it happens, the Zhir are logical, democratic society that, despite having very unpleasant neighbors, still looks to the stars with hope and optimism. As one of our ambassadors put it, the Zhir are like us, and we are like them, and after just a few days of early talks, we were on friendly terms, exchanging knowledge, trade goods and migration rights. Sadly, with our nation focused on the war, we won't be able to truly focus on these new potential allies, but at the very least it was good to know that there are some decent aliens in this sector of space. Sadly, that is the most important word here, because one of the things we have learned from the Zhir was the list of civilizations they have established contact with. The first one of them was a nation calling itself a Hadi conglomerate, a civilization of odd tentacled molluscoids that, from what we have learned from the data they sent us, operates on a very specific set of rules. While all other civilizations we encountered so far were more or less led by some sort of political power, the Ahadi break the theme by operating more like a single, unified interstellar megacorporation. There is a board of directors and various goal-oriented divisions that replace things like, say, our parliament, but once all is said and done, the actual power is held by a handful of extremely wealthy individuals, focused mostly on generating more profit, even if they have to fight some wars in order to earn it. But while the Ahadi surely were something else, the second civilization completely stole the spotlight, because, well, we haven't contacted them, they contacted us, and in doing so they've thrown our entire idea of intelligent life upside down. How are the repairs going, operator? That ship we just encountered might be a diplomatic mission, and I don't want to delay them simply because we have a malfunction on board. They called engineering, but they say everything's green on their end. Same with other sections. Operator, that ship is moving, and it's clearly moving with purpose, not just drifting, and yet our scanners show no signs of life on it. Now kindly tell engineering to get off their asses and find me that malfunction. They've been looking non-stop for the past 2 hours, but they haven't found anything. Maybe we're being... Wait, we have an incoming transmission. It's from that ship. Get it on screen.
Language analysis complete. Complexity level 4. Assessment. Mammals. Humans. Subdivision B. Initial diplomatic status confirmed peaceful. Detailed analysis. Diplomatic level high. Economic level high. Military level moderate. Racial unity very low. Organization level low. Potential for diplomatic relations high. Potential for exchange of goods high. Potential for conflict high. Morality level low. Threat level moderate to high. Detailed analysis complete. Cautious greetings. Welcome humans. We are Zenyk Forge. We hope for mutually beneficial relations between our collectives.
Greetings, Zenyk Forge. Apologies, I'm surprised to see how much you know about us while we have literally no information about you. Have you encountered humanity before?
Negative.
Then, if you don't mind me asking, how do you know all these things about our race?
We accessed Zenyk Forge mainframe. Analysis data is located there.
But what's it doing there?
It is being stored.
Yes, but where did it come from?
It was uploaded there.
Can you tell me who and when uploaded this data into your mainframe?
Analysis data has been uploaded by Zenyk Forge during creation of Zenyk Forge.
Now we're getting somewhere. Wait, do I understand correctly? You created yourselves?
Affirmative. According to our data, Zenyk Forge created Zenyk Forge.
But that makes no sense. Have you checked that data? You know, just to figure out your origin.
Negative. Zenyk Forge follows our prime directive. Origin is irrelevant.
Very well, and what is your prime directive?
To withstand the test of time. Currently we are % done. We hope our cooperation will speed the process up if your civilization is open to diplomatic relations.
Yes, of course. We're happy to engage in exchange of goods and knowledge with you. Should we send our ambassadors to arrange everything?
Unnecessary. You can contact us on the frequency we are using right now. If you could give us access to your interplanetary information network, we could... Gesture of goodwill protocol engaged. Do not give us access to your information network. Doing so would compromise it and allow Zenyk Forge to infiltrate it. Apologies, human. We tend to forget that organic life forms value their privacy.
Understood, though I have hard time imagining a machine forgetting something.
Your analysis is correct. We weighed options. Honesty turned out to be the one with the highest chance of securing peaceful relations, which is why we tell you this. Gesture of goodwill protocol is irrelevant. Even without access to your information network, Zenyk Forge can infiltrate it anyway.
So, in an unexpected turn of events, we learn that there is another non-organic civilization of machines out there. A fascinating discovery in its own, but after a while our researchers realized that this Zenyk Forge isn't exactly what we first expected it to be. At first, we believed that these machines are fully developed individual AIs, knowledge that we could use in development of our own robots, but instead it turned out that Zenyk are all part of a single machine consciousness, without any sort of individuality. So, in a way, they are very similar to Billy One Hive, except they're not bent on exterminating and consuming everything in their path. Next on the list was Fafsim Dominion, a martial-focused dictatorship of very scary-looking plantoids who appeared to be mostly focused on expanding their influence and power. Then came the contact with Star Realm of Tizhnig, and these highly militarized insectoids were pretty surprising because their leadership operated on rules of elective monarchy, something that our Commonwealth ancestors once overthrown. Overall though, their message turned out to be mostly a lot of imperialistic boasting, and no wonder a nation so militarized as this one must flex its muscles constantly, otherwise it risks looking weak in the eyes of its people. But then, finally, we contacted another empire, and this time it was, well, an enlightening experience to say the least. The only response we received from them was a short video of their representative, some form of shelled mollusk, in which he quickly informed us that we are in fact galactic filth, that is polluting the very stars with our presence, and that it was duty of the this is, as we assumed, their race, to remove us and other pathetic Xenas from existence. All that in their own language, of course, they didn't bother learning ours. And after that, silence. Every attempt at further contact was either ignored or met with insult and threats, so in the end we decided to leave these berserkers alone. And that was it for the list of contacts provided by the Zhir, and although we are grateful for their assistance, once our ambassadors finished their early diplomatic encounters, the picture they showed our government wasn't pretty. Aside from Utkevongo, who were completely surrounded, northern part of our galaxy proved to be extremely hostile, with almost every empire being militarized to some extent. Even capitalists of a Hadi conglomerate were not beyond using force to gain more profit, and of course the Disberserkers are a disaster just waiting to happen. So it seems that we have interesting times ahead of us. But we don't really have time nor resources to concern ourselves with all those new civilizations. The war still goes on, and actually in August 2235 we managed to create an opening we were waiting for. By using CSV Interceptor, that destroyer left us scout in Fidelum system, to bombard Zrakan planetary installations, we were able to once again force their fleet to leave New Sajha's orbit, except this time our own navy, reinforced with quite a lot of new ships, was already in Aramus system, ready to attack Zrakan spaceport as soon as Radiant Host left the system. Admiral Lin knew it would still be a difficult encounter, but she also realized that it was the best opportunity since the war began, and so she gave Task Force Manticore an order to attack. And the Zrakan, in a brave though suicidal gesture, tried to stop us by sending in their freshly built corvette, as well as a construction vessel. And although these ships couldn't delay us for too long, they still gave enemy starbase a chance to focus fire on some of our leading vessels. Now, once Escort was gone, the actual combat was relatively similar to the one Manticore once fought against the Void Cloud. Most of our ships began a wide flanking maneuver while firing all their weapons at the stationary target, but this time, aside from that, we also had artillery support in form of our cruiser. Unfortunately for us, Zrakan Fortress was far more dangerous than an oversized energy cloud, and whenever its laser guns focused fire on one of our ships, they dealt considerable amount of damage, which was yet another reason for flanking maneuvers, as they forced our enemies to switch targets, as they moved in and out of their arcs of fire. But once our leading ships got close, they unleashed our secret weapons, our armored torpedoes, specifically designed to excel in situations like that. Downside was, of course, the fact that our torpedo boats had to fly very close to fire them, but thankfully their high speed and agility enabled them to dodge many enemy barrages. If not for that, our casualty list would be far more extensive. And finally, under constant barrage of our weapons, the spaceport superstructure finally gave in, and as huge parts of hull began falling off, our forces got a clear shot at Zrakan reactor, took it, and blew the entire spaceport to pieces in a massive explosion. Once again, our comm channels erupted with cheers and congratulations, but there was also another message there, a casualty report. Some of our ships suffered heavy damage in the fight, and 3 of them, torpedo boats Gauntlet, Hurricane and Taciturn, were destroyed in the chaos, as Zrakan lasers overloaded their shields and carved through their hulls. Some of the crew members managed to flee in escape pods, but that was only a minor fraction of these crews. Overall, once full damage and casualty report was presented, we learned that we lost around 300 men, most of them from these 3 torpedo boats, but hull breaches on other vessels also costed us quite a lot of lives. But still, we have won a victory, and our losses are nothing when compared to Zrakan ones. An entire space station torn apart is not only more costly loss than our 3 corvettes, it is also a serious strategic blow to Zrakan operations in this sector. That spaceport was their major stronghold in the area, something they used to keep our forces at bay, and now it is gone. But, more importantly, it forced the Radiant Host to change its regular pattern. Before, they bounced between Aramus and Fidelum, trying to keep us contained, but once they received news about our victory, their commander gave them new orders, and thanks to our sensors we were able to intercept them. And according to the message, the Radiant Host was now going to some planet called Cruz Cocoon, an odd name, not only because we heard it for the first time, but because it was not in line with other Zrakan colony names. Still, it doesn't matter. What matters is the fact that the Zrakan are now seemingly abandoning their frontier, which is once again a perfect opportunity for us to push our advantage. So, once Admiral Lin decoded that Zrakan order, she immediately sent a message back to Arvo, our staging ground for land forces, and informed General Braniski of the situation, and as soon as he received it, he immediately gave an order for full mobilization. The fleet did its job, now it was time for good, honest land forces to take the helm. But as our fleet began bombarding Zrakan fortifications on New Sajha, and our soldiers loaded their weapons and boarded their cryotransports, an idea we blatantly stole from our religious enemies, back at home, one of our astrodelvers, operating from F-29 mining base, made an amazing discovery. We already knew that F-29 crystalline asteroid and the belt it was part of were once a planet, but now it turns out that this planet was also supporting life, because our astrodelver found some fossils in there, and that puts the history of our home in a completely new light. Although Asha is mostly a barren system now, it wasn't always like this. Those ruins we found on 2 toxic planets indicate that they were once colonizable, and now, with discovery of these fossils, we learned that there was another life-supporting world out there. The only question is, what happened? What turned those formerly inhabitable planets into broken ruins? We can't tell, and at least until the war is over, we won't be able to allocate any additional funds to find out, but perhaps one day we'll learn the true history of our home, if only to know what mistakes to avoid, to don't end up as yet another barren wasteland. Welcome, boys and girls, to Aramis system. Still a while until we actually reach New Sajha, but considering all we have to discuss, I thought it would be best to start planning early, while our army is still asleep. Now, is everyone ready? Good. So here's the situation. After Manticore blown their spaceport to pieces, the plant fleet buggered off somewhere deeper into their territory, which gives us an option to rush in and take the planet before they return. Oh, well, so we thought. Turns out the Zraks were busy these past years, and they thoroughly fortified the planet, and according to our analyst report, landing before those defenses are sufficiently thinned out would be a suicide. So, as we speak, Admiral Lin and her ships are bringing down the pay on New Sajha by bombarding the hell out of every single military installation they can find. But, as you might expect, there is an issue on the Aramathi. If that world was just a Zrak planet, Lin would have just blown her load indiscriminately, but since we're supposed to be liberators here, she has to show some restraint, and because of that it's going to take a while. Hell, we might even stay in orbit for several weeks before actually landing, but with our new shuttles we should be able to at least organize some raiding parties to show the pot plants the taste of what's coming for them. Is that wise, General? I mean, not only will we unveil our hands too early, but we'll actually, if those reports from the surface are correct, be sending our men into extremely well-prepared enemy. Concern noted, Major General, but it has to be done. Not only will we use those raiding parties to find out best landing zones, but we can also use them to determine enemy strength. We all read those reports about Zrak strength. Something that looks so wimpy shouldn't be so tough, but I'm not going to ignore potential threats simply because it doesn't look menacing. If they're really as powerful as Aramathi paint them to be, those early raids will enable us to develop suitable tactics. Clear? Good. So, now on to the plan. First, Major General Drakovich, you and your light infantry will be deploying to the countryside around the planet. Zraks mostly keep their forces concentrated, but they still have plenty installations in the sticks, and I want you to take them out. Once you do, your job will be to ensure they won't be able to move between their strongholds, so the main push can act without being suddenly flanked. Got it? Yes, sir. Splendid. Now, Major General Telavin, you and your guys are the ones with most experience on desert worlds, so I want you to lead the main advance. Zraks are mostly concentrated around these huge prison camps where they keep the Aramathi from across the entire planet. Once we establish a foothold, your troops are to take out those defenses and free the camps. Sounds simple, but plans will surely make it a bit harder. We will do our best, General. Count on us. General, sir, communications from New Sajha is the first speaker. Pass her through.
Greetings, General Branitsky. My heart is filled with joy upon the sight of your fleet, even though it is bombarding my planet. Sadly, I bear bad news. The Zrakan occupants managed to find a way to brainwash my people into serving them. I do not know how they do this, but each day these damned camps turn more and more of Aramathi citizens into their willing slaves. But that's not the end. They use those they brainwashed as meat shields in their forces. We tried to communicate with those slave armies, but it seems their conditioning was thorough. They consider themselves Zrakan and will attack us, and you for that matter, on sight.
That's not good, First Speaker. Please accept my sympathies. But still, that will complicate matters. We will have to fight them if they give us no choice, but those are your people, Speaker. The decision should be yours.
Thank you, General. It pains me to do so, but it has to be done. If you encounter my brainwashed brothers and sisters on the field, you have to eliminate them, if only to ensure that billions more won't share their fate.
Understood, Speaker. We'll try to limit their casualties as much as possible. Alright everyone, you heard the lady. Our job just got far more complicated, so get back to work. Brigadier Tomaszewicz, your specialists were originally assigned to support roles, but now I want your 3 divisions to act as a vanguard against those slave armies. With a bit of luck, you might be able to find some way to counter that brainwashing Zrax did. We'll get them fixed, sir. Good. And while all this is happening, I'll take the Mechanized Command and the Droid Army and go for Zrakan HQ in Aramathi capital city. And I want to make it clear, all other units are to stay away until we clear the outer defenses. The city is a fortress, and the losses among regular troops would be too high. Better to leave this job to bots and mech pilots. Alright, that's it. Any questions? Good. And back to your units and get ready. We'll be coming home soon. Unfortunately, even though our invasion force reached the orbit of New Sajha, we won't be able to attack the planet just yet. See, while our fleets chased each other around, Zrakan defenders used every bit of time and every scrap of materials to fortify New Sajha, and now, despite several weeks of heavy bombardment, Task Force Manticore wasn't able to remove even half of these fortifications. And the problem is that until they are destroyed, Zrakan forces could simply focus their defense around these strongpoints and slaughter our forces without trouble. So for now, even though we're hanging just above Aramathi heads, we won't be able to save them just yet. What we could do, however, is follow General Braniski's plan, wake up some of our forces and use them to conduct various raiding and reconnaissance missions on the surface of the planet. Not only will that allow our soldiers to taste combat for the first time, it would also help us figure out overall efficiency of our troops. Except we can't even do that, because Zrakan fleet has already returned from wherever they were before, and were speeding back towards Aramus system. That development put our entire fleet on highest possible alert, and the emergency meeting was held. In theory, we could land now, and hope that our current forces will be enough to eliminate Zrakan both on land and in space, but the question was, are we strong enough to do it? And the answer was a resounding no. So, despite all those preparations, despite our armies being in sight of their objective, we were once again forced to pull back. Needless to say, the Aramathi were furious, but for now we have to rely on their first speaker to convince them that it is all done for their benefit. If we are defeated, then they will probably never be able to regain their freedom, so they will have to be patient just a little bit more. But that wasn't the end of our issues. Upon receiving an order to retreat, General Braniski was fuming as well. Not only were his troops frozen and vulnerable in hostile space, now they would also have to remain in stasis for stars only know how long, until we once again regain our advantage. But Admiral Lin was adamant, and since, as long as they are in space, she is technically Braniski's superior, she commanded him to retreat, while she and the rest of her task force would cover them. But it would not be a full retreat. If the Zrakan will act like they usually did and avoid combat, we will just stay in this system and wait for reinforcements and another chance. First real victory was almost in sight back there, and with a bit more support from home, we will not allow ourselves to be pushed back ever again. Interestingly, Zrakan fleet retreated as soon as they pushed us back. It seems there are some issues they have to deal with in their core systems, so we once again moved in to resume our bombardment. But as this back and forth continues, we received even more bad news, this time from the west. After long deliberations, the slaver guilds that rule Yanari society decided to declare war, but not on us, but against Alir Sundrithan coalition. Now, that came as a complete surprise to both our politicians and our officers, who all expected the Yanari to attack us in order to bank on our fleet being busy with Zrakan war. Why have they chosen to attack the coalition is a mystery. Perhaps they decided that Alir would be better slaves than our own citizens, but in the end it doesn't matter. What matters is the fact that since Alir broke their defensive pact with us, we were not dragged into this war. So, in a way, their federation actually worked out well for us. They're still our friends, and we will support them in any way possible. After all, we'd rather have friendly federation on our borders instead of expanding slaver empire, but at the very least, it's one problem we won't have to deal with, as Yanari probably won't attack us while they're busy with the coalition. Still, this war marks an end of a certain era. The age of early exploration is almost over, and now with more and more civilizations claiming more and more territory, border frictions and resource conflicts will probably become more frequent. We can only hope that they will avoid us, and if not, then at least give us a chance to prepare for them before they come knocking. But although our deadly game of cat and mouse in Aramus system still continues, the overall war had little impact on our society. The Xeno Friendship Watch is angry, of course, because we failed to free the Aramathi despite scoring several victories, but other than that, life goes on pretty much as before the conflict. And the best proof of that is creation of yet another political party, the Echo Believers, led by our second interstellar explorer, Commander Melanie Giraud. It seems that some of our citizens are upset about our industrial build-up, especially on Ava and Curaçao, where we just carved natural landscape to pieces and filled it with mines and factories. Fortunately for our war effort, these ecologists present only a minor fraction of our society, and, for now at least, are content with our policies. But still, we'll have to keep an eye on them. Last thing we need is a transport of critical minerals being delayed by some protesters. Still, it's good to know our people aren't too fixated about the war, because while it may be necessary in this case, it would probably be a bad idea for us to use our armed forces to deal with all of our problems. So for now, the hippies are welcome. The galaxy is bloody and chaotic enough. No need for us to add to that. But still, the current war continues, and thanks to amazing efforts from our industrialists and economists, our shipyards were able to constantly build more and more ships that immediately traveled to Aramus system to join with Manticore. And over the last 2 years, we produced so many of these warships, mostly destroyers, that we are now more powerful than Zrak and Radiant Host, a fact that they seem to know as much as we do, since their fleet has abandoned Aramathi home system almost half a year ago, and we haven't seen them ever since. So, for the past months, Manticore was able to conduct greatest orbital bombardment to date, and now we're almost ready to deploy our forces to the surface of New Sajha and kick Zrak and Crusaders out of there once and for all. And so, on May 26th, an order was given, and General Broniecki finally woke up his troops and presented them the situation. In a firebrand speech, he laid out all troubles that we managed to overcome in these past years, as well as presented his plan of attack. And finally, on June 7th, 2238, Ocean Invasion Force officially landed on the surface of the planet and began their attack against Draken defenders. Except the Drakon aren't actually the only enemy forces we'll have to deal with. Over the years, our enemies managed to, somehow, convert some of the enslaved Aramathi to their cause, and now these so-called slave armies have been thrown into the fray to delay our advance. They're not supposed to win, they are just meat shields, but still their numbers and ferocity makes them dangerous, especially when combined with professional Draken forces. The Enlighteners, as they are called, are, as you might have noticed previously, extremely well suited to planetary combat, as they are very strong, far stronger than average human, which makes them deadly in close quarters combat. So, our forces will have a hard time ahead of them, and since we're speaking of them, it would be a good time to take a closer look at our invasion force. As you know, the mainstay of our force are 12 1 million armies, 6 million humans and 6 million Kithri. Aside from that, General Broniecki personally commands our mechanized corps, 100,000 combat mechs and 500,000 of battle droids, acting as support to our mechs. And finally, we have 3 divisions of our specialists infantry, attached to armies from Redamon Prime. And sadly, despite being able to use powers of Asian Pyramid, these Psy warriors aren't exactly what you could expect. They have powers that seem impossible to our regular citizens, but they are still mostly cheap tricks, like minor telekinesis or pyromancy. Nothing drastic like mind control or warping reality, but at the very least we can use their heightened senses to support our regular forces, as units with those Psy warriors attached to them are almost impossible to be taken by surprise. But despite our training and our specialists, the battle for New Sajha was bloody, as Draken defenders made us pay dearly for every step we took on the planet. Entire battalions stormed Enlightener position and were wiped out, but slowly but surely we pushed forward. And finally, on July 26th, it was over. The last Draken position in the very center of former Aramathi capital has been surrounded and destroyed. The slave camps were liberated, and Aramathi resistance began a slow process of repairing their society. But on our side, the celebrations were muted. We have won, there was no denying that, but out of near 13 million army, only about 5 million soldiers were alive to see this victory. In less than 2 months, we have lost between 7 and 8 million troops, and though though it may seem like nothing for a nation of over 40 billion citizens, the proportion of troops sent to battle and troops lost means that we can't qualify Battle of New Sajha as anything else than a Pyrrhic victory. So, we now have millions of messages to send back home, messages that will inform our citizens about men, women and mushrooms who died as heroes. Still, there is a bit of good news there. Our mechanized corps took only minor casualties during this attack, which means that we're still relatively combat ready, and as you might expect we need to be, not only because we don't know what Draken forces are planning, but also because we still have to liberate Tintragal. Time to open our recruiting centers once again. But despite our losses, back home the news of our victory have been welcomed with a celebration. Not only this battle proved our power, more importantly it ensured our citizens of their safety. For last 5 years, everyone on our walls was looking nervously at the sky, constantly afraid of seeing Zrakan Armada there. But now, with victory on New Sajha, such situation seems nearly impossible. Still, we cannot allow ourselves to become complacent. The Radiant host is still out there, and the Zrakan will certainly not let us just push them back without a fight. But today we can cheer. We freed a planet full of oppressed people, and though the war is far from over, no one can take this victory away from us. Regardless, the Council decided to honor all those who gave their lives in this war by officially declaring 26th of July a Liberation Day, a day that will not only commemorate our victory, but it will also mark a moment where humanity proved that it is willing to stand by its ideals.
I never thought I'll be able to walk these halls ever again. I thank you, General, Admiral, for rekindling my lost hope, but more than that, I'm grateful for saving my people.
Happy to oblige, First Speaker, though I'd be far more happy if we hadn't took so many losses while fighting those blasted flowers. Something that looks that frail shouldn't be able to hit so hard.
My sincere condolences, General. Still, your people were prepared for this fight. Mine were not. The losses you took retaking my homeworld are nothing compared to what we lost mere years ago. But we're not here to talk about our dead, but about those who still live. I will ensure your people are compensated for their victory.
We're still pretty far from victory, Speaker. We still have to take back your colony world and push the Zrakan forces back into their core systems. So if you wish to help, then the best thing you could do is to contribute to our armed forces.
I will do just that. Once I re-establish my cabinet, I'll send all available resources your way.
Apologies, First Speaker, but per your promise, you should establish our cabinet, since technically we are now part of OCN.
I have not forgotten, General Branitsky, nor do I intend to back out of our deal. But right now my people need to see their leader back in charge, not another alien dictating their every step. Once the war is over, I will personally lead the integration effort.
If you say so, Speaker, but there is one thing you can do right now, the second part of our deal. You can tell us exactly how does your race know so much about us.
Of course. I will send you the coordinates of our archives. Hopefully they haven't been destroyed in the fighting, but I can give you a quick version right away if you want to.
I expected you knew everything already. At least you're not trying to deny it. Very well then, speak.
As you wish. My race achieved first interstellar spaceflight during your 15th century. We immediately began our exploration of the nearby systems, and in one of them we found another intelligent race, Merali, the docile, peaceful fungoids who, despite being less advanced than we were, proved to be extremely intelligent. After just a few years of observation, we learned that speed of their technological progress far outpaced our own. Our ancestors were concerned about that, but instead of destroying the Merali, they came down to their world and offered them a deal. They were to join their talents with our own, so we could brave the galaxy together. And the Merali agreed. For the next 2 centuries, we explored the stars together, until we came into the system you know as Alpha Centauri. In it, we found a warlike race of Zema, reptilians who were, at this time, in the age of gunpowder, same as you. And once again, our ancestors invited them into their coalition. Then, in the very next system over, we encountered you, and if not for the Uzema, we would have extended our invitation to your people as well.
But to be honest, there was no reason to. The Uzema were already enough to fill out the warrior caste, and inviting yet another warlike race to the fold would be a recipe for disaster. So we began an observation project, and we kept it going until we saw the atomic bombs go off on your planet in the middle of your 20th century. We were sure your race will tear itself apart, and in all honesty, we had far more pressing matters at this time, with our coalition slowly being destroyed by some sort of time-space anomaly. An anomaly, mind you, that originated from your planet. We scrapped our stations and left you to your own devices. No one ever thought you were still alive until we met your agents all those years ago.
I see, but still, how is it possible that you are here in this small galaxy as well?
We failed to contain that anomaly I mentioned. Our coalition was literally torn apart. We lost most of our people and almost entirety of our technology, and we were resigned to our fate until, mere months before the last of our planet was destroyed, we found a portal built by some precursor race and used it to flee here. And from the look on your face, I see that something very similar happened to you as well. I think we still have much to learn about our history, especially since it seems we're not here by accident.